Hello interwebs, welcome to Let's Build Computers. My friend Hugh and I are back with his 5700 XT that we looked at back in July, just after it had come out. This is the 50th anniversary special edition of the card. And during our rather brief unboxing and first impressions video, we determined that while the card performed absolutely brilliantly, it was very, very noisy and the stock cooling on it was just incredibly lackluster. However, this wasn't entirely surprising. Graphics cards with stock coolers are not known for having great cooling on them, and it was Hugh's intention from day one to watercool this graphics card. And that's why today we've got a full set of EK watercooling that we're going to be outfitting to this computer. So let's roll the intro and we'll dig into it. Okay, right, so we've unboxed all of our sweet new gear. So this is the EK Vector for the Radeon RX 5700, and this is the RGB version. So this is not the plexiglass version. I believe there is a clear acrylic version of this block available as well. However, it's a bit more expensive and we're looking for performance, not looks on this build. If it looks great, that's awesome. That's a great byproduct, but performance was the key here. So this is the Vector. However, you can see that even without the plexiglass top, it's a thing of beauty. So all fully machined out single block construction. And this has also come with we've got the thermal pads for our VRM and memory chips. We've also got a single slot backplate for it. And we've got the fittings bag as well. This was supplied with just EK Ectotherm thermal paste. No idea if that's any good. Someone in the audience might be able to tell me. Failing that, we've got better stuff with the other stuff. So don't worry about the thermal paste, we'll get to that. Next up, we've got the EK Velocity Copper and Plexi AMD water block. So I'll give you a close-up on this one because you can see with the plexiglass top, the gorgeous microfins at the base of this guy. Let me just zoom in for you. There we go, check that out. Look at all those tiny little micro channels there. That's the money shot. Absolutely lovely bit of kit. So this will be going on a 2700X that's currently in this system. This also came with Thermal Grizzly high performance. What did we reckon this was? War Hydronaut, wasn't it?
Probably Hydronaut by the fact that Hydronaut's designed for water cooling.
Yeah, we're assuming this is Thermal Grizzly Hydronaut. And to put things in perspective, Thermal Grizzly Cryonaut is arguably one of the best thermal compounds money can buy, but Cryonaut is designed for LN2 cooling. The difference is what temperature it goes down to while still remaining functional. Obviously, if you're only expecting your CPU, if you're only expecting the device under test to go down to, say, 20 degrees or so, then you don't need a thermal paste that functions down to minus 200. So that's the difference here. So obviously, even if this is only Hydronaut as opposed to Cryonaut, that doesn't affect our performance in any meaningful way. The point is, this is probably one of the best thermal pastes we could ask to use right now. And that came in the box, which is pretty impressive as well. So really nice touch there. It also came with both the backplates for both AM3 and AM4 fittings. And the block also has these slotted mount holes there, so it fits both the AM3 and 4 platforms with ease. For our radiator, we've got the EK Coolstream 360PE, which, as the name suggests, is a 360 degree radiator. So we've got triple 120 millimeter fan mounts here. We're going to front mount this at the front of the case that we're running in. And cooling the radiator, we've got 3 Noctua Redux 120 millimeter fans. PWM, of course, none of that 3-pin rubbish. And these guys are probably the best value and performance fans that you can buy. The EK will sell you fans, however, the EK fans are not as high performing of these and are at least double the price. They're obnoxiously expensive, and Noctua fans, probably some of the best money can buy as well. The actual static pressure, which is what you need to force air through a radiator, is a shade higher on these guys, and they cost less. So 3 of those going on the front of it. For the pump, we've got the venerable D5 pump here. with the built-in reservoir as well. So this is the EK X-Res 140 Revo setup. This is the non-RGB edition. There is an RGB edition where that little EK logo in the middle of the reservoir will light up as well. However, we've opted for the non-RGB version here. Again, lowering costs. And that guy is powered off of a Molex connector, and we've got a 4-pin fan header for monitoring as well. So this guy is going to be mounted somewhere in the side, bolted with this bracket here. And we'll be filling it from the top through that nozzle there. And last but not least, we've got the EK torque fittings all over with this thing. So these are our 0.5mm fittings, all in black, all EK, and all to go with our 1/2-inch tube. Right, so that's all of our kit. So what we're going to do now, we're going to do ourselves a test fit. We're going to cut and fit all of our tubing and get it all set up, and then we'll get to building.
The first thing we need to do is strip down the PC and dust it out. We're not going to sterilize it because this is a workhorse, not a show horse. Neither of us have fitted water cooling before, but Hugh watches more relevant YouTube videos than I do, and I used to have a Danger Den Maze 3 system about 15 years ago. Other than that, we're making this up as we go. The front case fans and the big Noctua cooler are coming out forever, while the 5700 XT is coming out just while we fit the water block to it. The CPU water block will be no different to fitting an air cooler, but GPU water blocks are complicated to fit. There are many screws and a lot of points where the block must contact hot components of the card.
Okay, right. Let's get this cooler off. It's a shame this cooler is bollocks because it feels and looks really nice. Okay, that's our back plate off, which is confirmed not functional. However, it's worth noting that even non-functional backplates do drastically improve the rigidity of the card and nearly always eliminate card sag. So, worth noting that just because a backplate is not thermally functional, it can still have a really good impact on just how the card sits. So we've got a Delta blower fan here, which does move independently once it's unscrewed. The back area is blocked off. So yeah, as I say, this is just for show. There are metal fins there, but this is entirely blocked off this end of the card. It's not an intake, despite what many people keep telling you. So there's our thermal pads for the VRMs, which have got a little bit of heat sinking on top there. So we've got airflow across those. Not a huge amount of metal work though, which is kind of interesting. Then we've got the memory heat pads around here. Couple of secondary dooders there, possibly memory controllers, I'm not sure. I think that might be memory power phases actually. Yeah, I think that's memory VRMs. Then we've got a graphite sheet on the actual GPU die, and you can see there how this entire copper area is the vapor chamber, which is quite interesting. And if we look down the back, you can see that on top of that, we've then got our standard fin stack. So friendly reminder, vapor chambers are a poor man's heat pipe. What the vapor chamber does, it's just like a heat pipe in that it's a space filled with a vapor that evaporates on the heat to spread the heat out. But a vapor chamber spreads the heat out on a two-dimensional space across the base of the cooler. And that spreads it out from the hot spot in the middle. However, a heat pipe that you see in partner cards, the heat pipes will actually carry the heat all the way to other ends of the cooler and up to the top, and it carries it all the way in a three-dimensional space away from this GPU. So heat pipes drastically more effective than a vapor chamber. However, a vapor chamber is better than just having a copper slug. It's better than nothing. So yeah, there's our stock cooler removed. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to clean these chips up and prep them up and then stick our EK water block on top of this bad boy. Look at that, that went on almost perfectly straight. Good enough that the screws will fix the alignment there. Okay, right, we've got our water block now screwed down. This turned out to be a lot more of a mission than I expected. We've put in the bulk of our time just fitting this water block now. Thankfully, the CPU is not going to be quite as challenging. However, it's done. We've got this lovely, slim, single slot card now. We're going to need to put some bungs in for whichever direction our pipes are going. And in addition to that, we've still got this RGB tail. I'm leaving that loose just so when we actually get it all working, we can plug that in just so you guys can see how it lights up as well. So yeah, that's that. In terms of screws, we've got a vast selection of screws left over, and our guess is that this kit is designed to accommodate both partner cards and the different reference designs, because EK, they won't know what kind of backplate you're trying to use. So we had a selection of different screws, and like, for example, we had a couple of nuts and bolts, so we could stick a nut in there. Just for this guy here and things like that. So the kit came with various different screws, so you can just mix and match and figure out what works for you. So for us, it looked a bit daunting because we were like, we've got a lot of screws and no idea where to put them. But if you just start populating screw holes, you'll figure it out, basically. Past that, this guy should be ready to rock and roll. So we're going to move on and start getting the rest of the kit fitted into the PC now.
Ah, right, okay. So, important to note, the flow path in this matters.
Yes.
And it's actually marked on the block as well.
Ah, how does it say? Oh, yes, you've got an in and an out.
Yeah, that one's in, that one's out.
Yeah.
That
makes sense visually as well, because
I was only going to say purely because the picture of the block had those on there. I was like, oh yes.
Yeah, and that visually makes sense that that's the in path, because then it just means that the inrush of water is going straight onto the core.
Yeah.
And then it just collects on the output there. However, there is actually, there's also a hole on the bottom where obviously the RGB would go into.
Oh,
interesting. That's presumably a mounting point.
Also, the other thing this does, this fits with FM.
Why the fuck would you watercool FM? For blistering A10 performance. Oh, FM. Why did you exist?
Yeah. This is a bit weird. I haven't had a single slot GPU in, well, ever.
Average farmer remembers. I think the last single slot card I had was my 8800 GT.
Yeah, that was single slot.
Yeah.
Oh, excuse me. I just need to bend the case in.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, do you want me to? Yeah, are you good?
No, I don't require you stabbing my thumb, thank you.
Shh.
Maybe.
Okay, it's been a heckin' long evening as we've had to do a lot of fiddling and adjusting and figuring it out. But we believe we have assembled a functional water cooling loop. So we've got pump into CPU, CPU into GPU, GPU into RAD, RAD back to pump. And we're operating on the policy of loop order doesn't matter here. You can fight about that in the comments. I think we're ready to go. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take it upright. Then we're going to just detach our reservoir so we can hold it up high so we can fill and feed without air. And we're going to run the system, just pump only, computer switched off so we can fill it and leak test it. And then hopefully, if we're lucky and we've got no leaks, then we'll be ready to actually try and close it up and run it live. So we're going up right again.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Okay, yeah, you cap that up and then we'll pulse the pump.
Have you...
Yeah, okay. So if you just manage that pump a sec. Right. Yeah, okay, right. I'm going to leave the towel there just in case of disaster. And we're going to pulse the pump. So, and go. That's both cool and terrifying.
There you go.
Lot of air in the rad still. Oh yeah, there you go. There comes the air. If we keep everything dry, then we know that any moisture is too much moisture. And power on.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, yeah, okay, I'll keep that going.
There we go. It's just pushed the load out.
Oh, you know what? That is pulling an amp at 8 volts.
There we go.
We're still voltage controlled, but...
That's better.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it'll take days to get the bubbles out. However, hopefully we can at least get it to a point where we can fire it up and just go, it works, kind of thing.
Yeah, do you want to stop the pump again?
Yeah. Well, it is pumping them out.
Are they actually not being drawn back in there?
Oh, they are, you're right.
Yeah.
Oh, I see, yeah. Okay, yep. Can I... I've just killed the voltage down to... Wow, that cut off really quickly. 7 volts is too little. Okay, right. So we've got it all in. It's filled. There's obviously bits of little trapped air here and there. It's always going to happen with water cooling. Based on past knowledge from over a decade ago, it can take days to get those bubbles out. You know, it just needs runtime basically. But eventually, the pump and the reservoir will clear the air because that's what it's there for. But in addition to that, it's now 2 in the morning. Me and Hugh are tired and we want to go home. So we're going to run up and we're going to run our benchmarks just so we can make sure that the actual cooling ability of this is ready to go, because that's what we set out to do. And before the outro, you should see something of this when it's all mounted up properly and that air has been pumped out. So I'm going to plug this thing in, we're going to fire it up, and let's see if it's all been worthwhile. Oh, the temperature is bouncing a little bit.
We've got a really bad mount. Junction.
I see,
It's
yes.
40 odd degrees.
Yes.
It should be 15 or 20.
Yes, I see your point. Hypothetically, I do agree with you, but hypothetically. That brings it down slightly, however, you're correct.
But, well, the delta between the two is
That's
the important
right.
part.
Yeah. Well, we've got this thing up and running, but we've got a bad mount on our water block. And we know this because the edge temperature and the junction temperature on the GPU are wildly different. We've got like a 40-degree difference between them. And that means that there's poor contact between the GPU block and the GPU itself. So this might be, there's a lot of things that could be, none of which I'm going to go into right now this very moment. However, we did run it up and we have got water cycling and it's not leaking. So as proof of concept, we're there, but we're going to have to come back for another session on this one. So see you guys after the magic of video editing. So yeah, I'll see you guys after the cut. Bye. Okay, so panic over. We thought we were going to have to drain the system and remount the whole water block and everything, but we actually averted it. All we did in the end was we got the screwdriver and just backed off the 4 GPU core screws and just let the water block settle a bit and then tighten them back down again. And that seemed to resolve our issue perfectly. So now when we run it, we're getting the correct temperatures, which we'll show you in just a moment. In terms of the rest of the system, as you can see, we've got our front mount rad, and then we've got some nice curved loops on our tubing. You could probably tighten a few of these up. Some of our ones have got a little bit of excess on. However, when it comes to tubing, better too long than too short, basically. Again, this setup is likely to change it in the future, specifically with the mounting of the pump and res. We didn't actually have any kind of mounting bracket for the pump, we just didn't think of this in advance. So we had to make good, and we actually ended up fashioning a custom bracket to mount it up the top of the case, which is a little bit janky, not something I'm particularly proud of. However, it solved the issue, and as you can see, we've got it mounted up there. In the future, this guy will probably get moved or put on a proper mounting plate, and that will allow us to shuffle it back toward the back of the case a bit more and center it a bit nicer. And then later on in the long-term future, it may end up getting mounted upright in a different case or something like that. Everything else has come out really nicely. We've switched on the RGB for you as a special treat, and as you can see, the actual graphics card water block has got huge illumination around the front, and we've got a little bit of illumination on the Radiant and the EK logo there as well. And where that is plugged directly into the RGB fusion port on the motherboard, that is all synced up with the motherboard LEDs as well, which is a nice touch. So they all move at the same time. So past that, we'll run up Firmark again and we'll show you what improvements we've actually got. Okay, right, so we're back in Firmark, and I'll just explain a couple of the numbers that we're paying attention to on screen now. The two important ones are in the top left, which is where it says 40 degrees and 59 degrees, 58. The reason why we've got two temperatures there is one of them is our edge temp, that's the lower one, and the other one is our junction temp, that's the higher one. The junction temperature is the highest thermal probe inside the GPU die. There's like 120 odd of them in there, and each one, it will take the highest reading of that, and that is our junction temp, which is theoretically our real GPU temperature. Then the edge temp is a thermal probe that's at the edge of the GPU die. And the reason why we have both of them is that this allows us to monitor heat inside the GPU versus heat getting out of the GPU. And it tells us how good our thermal transfer out of the chip is into the cooler. So it's important, ideally we want those numbers to be as close as possible so we know that we're sucking out as much heat as humanly possible. That's how we knew that we had a bad mount earlier on in the video, because we had a massive delta, that's a difference essentially, a massive difference between those temperatures, which meant that there was a lot of heat inside the GPU, but we weren't getting it out of the chip. And that's how we knew that we had a problem. So now we've got our delta back within an acceptable level, which is around 20 or 30 degrees delta or so. So 20 or 30 degrees difference between inside the core and the edge of the core. Now in terms of raw numbers, right now, just while I waffle to you guys, we've got it on just stress tests. So you'll notice that we're bouncing off like 220 megahertz. So what I'll do in a sec is we'll switch it back to the GPU benchmark test, which is what we ran earlier on. The problem is what we didn't realize at the time is that the benchmark is frame rate limited to 150 FPS, which means we were actually sitting on the frame rate limiter and not actually stressing the card as hard as it could go, which is giving us slightly skewed results. However, when we run that test again, you'll see that we do get better results than we had earlier on, which also just proves that we're getting much better performance out of the card on water. And that is aside from the fact that we're getting much better temperatures and none of the noise. Like, the difference in noise is staggering. So let's switch back to the benchmark. Right, so now we're back into that benchmark, and you can see that our clock is sitting a little bit lower, like around 1900. However, more importantly, our temperature is still floating around the 80 degrees mark instead of sailing over 100, and our clocks are solidly sitting around 1900-ish, as opposed to slowly dropping down to 1800, 1700, even touching down to 16 something or other. So even though we're actually bouncing off of a frame rate limiter here, we have proven that we're still getting better results and a more consistent clock speed. And that is going to be reflected in games as well, where in certain recent games that this computer has been running, such as the new Grid, we were certainly seeing these exact issues in Grid. And now we're going to see more consistent frame rates there. And of course, the real life performance is where it matters. So all in all, an absolutely solid result.
I'll want to leave that for a month or so.
Oh,
just
okay,
because
yeah.
obviously the paste itself will pump itself around due to contraction.
Yeah,
And
so
it's
it may settle.
It may
Yeah.
settle a little bit lower.
Yeah. So all in all, for our first water cooling attempt in over a decade, I'm quite happy with the results. And past that, thank you very much for watching everyone, and we'll see you all next time. Bye for now.